Most authentication video tutorials out there teach you how to create sign-up and login functionality for your apps. But what happens when a user wants to change their email or update their name? If you use a database to authenticate your users, it may be fairly straightforward. However, if you're using a more modern approach with a third-party identity provider such as Cognito, Auth0, or Firebase, this can get a bit tricky. Don't worry, today we'll fix that. I'll walk you through how to securely edit user information in your React app using Amazon Cognito's SDK. Before we dive into the code, let's first take a quick look at the Amazon JavaScript SDK and understand how it works. And if at any point the code feels a bit overwhelming, feel free to check out complete guides for Node.js and JavaScript that I linked in the description below. They're great not only if you're getting started, but also if you're an experienced developer and looking to refresh your skills or fill in a few knowledge gaps.
In order to learn how to use AWS JavaScript SDK, you need to go to docs.aws.amazon.com, then scroll down to Product Guides and References section, and type in JavaScript. And here you can click on AWS SDK for JavaScript. The current version of AWS SDK for JavaScript is version 3. So they have developer guide, API reference, and migration guide. So let's click first on the developer guide. Developer guide basically explains what AWS SDK for JavaScript is and how to use it. Here on the left-hand side, they have Get Started section. We are more interested how to configure the SDK for JavaScript. If we open it up, we can take a look at how to set credentials. And what we are looking for specifically is how to set credentials in Node.js. We will be using from env credentials provider, where AWS access keys from environment variables are basically pasted in CLI or command line interface. There is also an interesting section, credentials for a Node.js Lambda function or EC2 instance. So basically, when you deploy your application on EC2, ECS, or Lambda, you don't need to set AWS keys as environment variables. You just basically create an IAM role that you give access to the resource that you need, in our case, Amazon Cognito, and then that instance, EC2 instance or Lambda, will have access to Amazon Cognito without any credentials that you need to put as environment variables. Now let's go and check out API references. Click here on the API references. On the left-hand side, you have a bunch of services that you can access using AWS JavaScript SDK. And here we're interested in Amazon Cognito, so specifically Cognito Identity Provider. I have it starred right here. However, if you don't, you'll need just to scroll down there in alphabetical order so you can find Cognito Identity Provider. So let's go ahead and click on it. Cognito Identity Provider Client section first tells you how to install the library, and it also have the list of operations right here. For example, if we need to get user using Cognito AWS SDK, we just type in here get user. And here we have a command, admin get user. So you click on it and it basically tells you how to use this command, right? We will need for configuration user pool and username. And then we instantiate this command. And then we just say client send the command, and obviously we create a new client right over here using the configuration. And in our case, this configuration actually will be empty because we will put AWS keys into the CLI as environment variables. Here documentation also gives you a response that you might expect to get when executing admin get user command. And obviously down below you have admin get user command input, all the parameters that you need, and the output, the parameters that you'll get in the response. And also very helpful, it tells you what errors or exceptions it's going to throw. So next, for example, the operation we're going to be using is update user command. So you search for update user. And here you're going to get update user attributes command. That's what we're going to be using. We're going to be updating name and phone number. Again, it gives you the example how to use it. You instantiate client, then you have your input, and then you basically instantiate the command and you send the command. And again, down below, you have the command attributes input, and the output as well. And this is how you use AWS JavaScript SDK version 3. Now let's go to Visual Studio Code to learn how to use it to update authenticated user information. I am in Visual Studio Code that has React Router app that uses Cognito authentication. As usual, the link to the code will be in the description below. Let's go into the app folder, routes.cs file. Here I added account settings route under the dashboard layout. And if we go to the routes folder, we can see account settings.cs file. This route is protected by auth middleware, and also it has a loader and the action functions that are pretty much empty right now. The loader function is returning a hard-coded user with a name, email, email verified, and identities. This is how Cognito JavaScript SDK will return us the user, and the property identities means if there is this property that the user got authenticated through Google. So, and if we do have these identity properties, it means, we cannot reset password, for example, or maybe update an email because, the user is going to be obviously using the Google email. And this loader function just returns this hard-coded user. The action function also returns the hard-coded object with a OK true and the message user information updated successfully. In the account settings function, I actually took some time to create UI, so let's quickly walk through it. So I have a couple use effects here that basically displaying error or displaying success. I have a basic information section that has the name field, and we use fetcher form to submit it. And then we obviously display error if there is an error and display success if there is a success. And finally, we have a cancel button. Basically, when user clicks edit, the input field will open, and then when user clicks cancel, the input field name will collapse. Editing email works the same way, except for here we actually check if user has an email. User may not have an email if they logged in using Google. In our case, we will allow editing email field only if user has an email. Much in the same way like we have name, we have also the input field email. And we obviously have a display error if there is an error, and then again we have check the fetcher state. Also, we check if email is verified, right? And if email is not verified, then we're gonna ask user to enter verification code that was sent to their email. The way Cognito works, if you update email or phone number attribute, it will send a verification code to the email or text it to that phone number. So here we're providing a functionality for the user to confirm their email. Also, it may happen that the user will need to resend the verification code. So right here, we also have a field which is kind of hidden, right, to be able to resend the verification code. So it's going to be basically like a button styled as a link. So if user didn't receive verification code, they can click on that link to resend verification code. Finally, we have a section login information where user can change their password. However, we can only show it to the user and be able for user to edit it when user does not have identities, meaning the user wasn't logged in using Google. And this is basically the UI for the user to update their information. So let's go ahead and check how this UI looks in the browser by running npm run dev. Let's go to the browser and click on the Get Started button. We are redirected to Cognito hosted UI. Let's go ahead and enter email, click next. And then gonna go ahead and enter password, click continue, and then we're prompted to enter the code from the multi-factor authentication, and let's just do that. Great, we are signed in, and if we go right here and click on our Alejandro Ruskin little icon here, we have account settings page that I created, and as you can see, there is a layout for changing user information. We have a basic information section, and then we also have a login information. So if you click on edit, and then you can basically enter the information, click save, and you got a message that the user information is successfully saved, but it is a fake message because action is currently returning OK true. Now let's head back to Visual Studio Code to create code in loader and action functions to make this user interface functional. The first thing that we're going to do is install AWS SDK Client Cognito Identity Provider Library with NPM. The next thing that we need to do is to set AWS credentials for development. If you are using IAM Identity Center like I do, so you will just select the access keys from appropriate account, and then right here you select the first option, set AWS environment variables, you copy that, and then you go to your IDE and you simply just paste those keys and hit enter, and you are all set. However, if you are not using IAM Identity Center, you can create a user for development and assign strict permissions, for example, to only access Cognito, and then create access key for that user, and then you can paste it in the CLI. But you gotta be careful because those keys, they're not gonna expire, right? The ones that I pasted from the Identity Center will expire as soon as my session expires, so around 8 hours. However, if you're going to be using user and assigning access keys to the user, those keys won't expire, so you got to be careful not to expose them. So next we can update the code in the loader function to actually fetch the authenticated user. We will need to import get session. After we get session, we instantiate Cognito Identity Provider Client and admin get user command. Let's go ahead and import them too. Next, we're going to configure admin user command with a user pool ID that we get from the environment variables, and then username that we're going to get from the session. Next, we will get Cognito user by just client send command. And if we cannot get Cognito user or attributes, will throw an error. Next, if we have user attributes, Cognito user attributes come in the form of an array of objects with a name and value. So we need to basically map them into normal object that we used to with a property and the value. So we'll do that. And after that, we just return the user. Next, let's go ahead and update user name in the action. So first, what we're going to do is going to grab the name using form data. So after we get the name, we can actually do a simple validation. In this validation, we will simply check if the name is not empty. However, for your purposes, you can do a more sophisticated validation. And obviously, if name is empty, we return OK false, and error name cannot be empty. This error message will be displayed under the user input form field. The next thing that we will do is we'll get the username from the session, the way we did it in the loader. Next, we will create Cognito Identity Provider Client. Then we're going to add username to the user attributes. And finally, we will create the command, right? Admin update user attributes command. So we also need to remember to import it. And in the admin update user attributes command, again, we'll pass the user pool, username, and then the user attributes that we created. Then we're going to have a try catch to update user attributes. We simply do client send the command, and then we actually need to update the session, right? If we successfully updated the name of the user, we use it to show in the navigation bar, and we take it from the session. So in our case, we'll check, right, if the user has name in the attributes and we update it, we'll just set the new username in the session. And then when we are returning the response, we will also commit this session so the username persists. And obviously, if something goes wrong, right, we have a catch here, and then we'll return OK false, the error message if we receive any or just failed to update. We're all set. Now all we have to do is to add Cognito user pool ID to our environment variables. So, and you just click on your Cognito user pool, and your Cognito user pool ID will be right here. So you can copy it and add it to your environment variables in the .env file. After that is done, just run npm run dev to check if the application is working. If you're enjoying this video and learning something new, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Let's go to localhost, and we can go to account settings, and then you can see that we're now getting the real user information, right? The name and the email. And now let's go ahead and try to update the name. When we click save, we can see that the user information is updated, and as you can notice right here on top, the user information also got updated because we saved it in the session. So updating username is working. So let's work on updating the other things like email and the password. Back in the VS Code, let's do some more updates to the action function. And to save time, I'll just paste the whole code and I'm just going to explain what it's doing. So in addition to the name, and we're going to get email, the code, and we're going to have a resend verification property and the new password. All we're going to get this from the form data. Then we'll do some checks, right? Like we did for the name. We're going to do a check for the email if it's not empty, and then the code if it's not empty, and the new password. And by default, Cognito user pool has the restrictions of the password being 8 characters and greater, and contain upper and lowercase letters and special characters. You can do this in your application to get the user instant feedback if they're typing the password incorrectly. But for simplicity, we'll just make sure that the length of the password is not less than 8 characters. Next, we're going to get the username from the session, as we already did, and then instantiate Cognito Identity Provider client. Next, we are going to instantiate API client with the session and the empty URL. Now we're going to do a few checks. So if we have code, then we're going to be using a verify user attributes command. And this command also requires the access token. And we're going to get this access token from the API client that we instantiated earlier. And the reason we're getting it from the API client and not the session is that the token is short-lived, right? Access token is only valid for maybe like an hour or a few minutes. So by the time we'll need to use it, it may be expired. And if we go to services, API client.server.cs command, we have this helper function get access token that checks if the token is expired. It just refreshes the token and resaves it into the session. So, and that's the reason why we're getting the access token from the API client. And then we'll put the attribute email, and then we'll send the code. If everything is great, we will display the message email verified successfully. However, if there is an error, we'll put the failed to verify error. Then we're gonna check if we have resend verification, so meaning user actually clicked on the resend verification button, or we're gonna display it as a link. And if they did, we're gonna send a command get user attribute verification code command that will also actually require an access token and the attribute name that is an email. And then again, if verification code is successfully sent, we'll display that message. However, if something goes wrong, we'll put fail to send verification code or whatever message Cognito is going to send us back. Next, we're going to check if the user is trying to update the password. Then we're going to send admin set user password command that will require user pool ID, username, new password, and if it's permanent, we'll just set it to true. And obviously, if success, then password updated successfully. If there is an error, we'll display this error message to user. And finally, we will have these user attributes, right, that we need to update. In our case, is the name and the email. And then we'll check if the user attributes length is 0, right, to just make sure this user attribute array is not empty. We will send the error no data to update to the user. But if the attributes array is not empty, we will create admin update attributes command, and we'll just basically send it like we did before. This code didn't change, and we obviously won't forget to commit the session. And that's it for the code. Let's go ahead and test it out. So let's go ahead and switch to the browser. We have our temp mail right here. We can copy this to the clipboard and go ahead and click on edit email and paste this new email. And then we can click save. And it showed us that the email got updated successfully and Cognito sent the verification code. So we can enter the verification code right over here. And as you can see, in the temp mail, we received the verification code. Let's click on here and copy that verification code. And then we're going to go ahead and paste this verification code into the input field and click verify. However, what we're going to receive is an error that the access token does not have required scopes. So the verification of the email failed. So let's go ahead and fix this error by adding an extra scope. So you would think email scope will be enough, but it's not. So in the Cognito user pool, we'll go to app clients. We'll click on the client that we created, and then we'll click on the login pages right here, click edit. And then as you can see, you have OpenID Connect scopes, right? We have email, OpenID, and profile. However, we also need AWS Cognito sign-in user admin scope. So let's go ahead and select that scope and click Save Changes. Now we have all the scopes in the Cognito setup, and we need to update our code to have this scope as well. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and here in the services we have auth.server.ts. That's where we putting the scopes right here that we are requesting when we're using Auth 2.0 authentication. And let's go ahead and add aws.cognito.signin.user.admin scope. This scope will not be automatically picked up by our authenticated user, so we basically need to log out and then log in again. So back in the browser, let's go ahead and log out from the application, and then we will have to log in again. To log in, we will be using our new email, and then we're gonna enter the password, and finally MFA authentication code. We are successfully logged in. If we go to the account settings, we can see that the email is not verified. We coincidentally have this resend verification code functionality that we created. So now we can actually click on it, and you can see it sent verification code, and verification code is sent. So now we can go back to the temp mail, and we can see that we received another verification code right here. So we can go ahead and copy that code and then paste it into the input field and click verify email. And now email got verified because we have enough scopes. And this is how you can verify the email, when you change the email in Cognito. And finally, the password, right? So that's very simple. Again, we just need to enter the new password. Let's go ahead and do just that. And when we click save, message is that password is successfully changed, and now we have a new password. And that's how you let users securely update their information in a React app using Amazon Cognito. If you want to take your skills further and learn how we created authentication with Amazon Cognito in the first place, including adding multi-factor authentication and social logins with Google, check out my full course, React Authentication with Amazon Cognito, MFA, and Social Login.